The stagecoach came rattling down the dusty road as the last of the September sun painted the Wyoming sky in shades of gold. Folks at Willow Creek Station stepped aside while the horses snorted and tossed their heads. Dust hung in the air like drifting smoke. Carrick Montgomery stood on the wooden platform with his hat pulled low and his hands steady at his sides. He had trimmed his beard, polished his boots, and practiced a polite greeting at least a dozen times. Today was the day he would meet his mail-order bride, Amelia Foster, the woman who had agreed to start a life with him out on this quiet stretch of frontier land. He checked his pocket watch, even though he had looked at it moments before. His heart beat with a mixture of hope and nerves. Amelia's letters had been thoughtful and well-written. She had spoken of wanting a fresh start far away from Boston. She described herself as a schoolteacher who wished for a peaceful life and a steady companion. Carrick had pictured her stepping down from the coach with calm eyes and a hopeful smile. But when the coach door opened, he saw something very different. A pale, gloved hand slid out first, gripping the frame. Then, the hem of a dusty blue dress appeared. A young woman stepped down carefully, keeping her head low. The wind lifted the edge of her bonnet, and Carrick saw her face. She was crying. Not a single quiet tear, but full, heavy tears that left shiny trails across her cheeks. Her eyes were red, her breath uneven, and she held a small valise pressed tight to her chest like she was protecting it from the world. The driver muttered that she had not spoken a word the entire ride from Cheyenne. Carrick barely heard him. He stepped forward slowly. "Miss Foster," he said. She nodded, but her shoulders trembled. She tried to wipe her face with a damp handkerchief, only smearing the tears more. "I am sorry to meet you like this," she whispered. Her voice was thin and fragile. Carrick felt every practiced line vanish from his mind. There were people watching now. Some whispered. Others stared openly at the strange scene. He did not want Amelia to feel like a spectacle. He moved gently to her side and offered his arm. "Come with me," he said. "Let's step away from the crowd." She followed him to the far end of the platform where no one else stood. He handed her a clean handkerchief and waited while she tried to gather herself. Her hands shook so much she could barely hold the cloth. "You do not have to pretend with me," he said softly. "You had a long journey. You can take your time." Amelia looked up in surprise, like she had expected anger or disappointment instead. "I fear I have made a terrible mistake," she said. His stomach tightened. He asked quietly if it was because of him. She looked startled and shook her head fast. "No, you are not the problem," she said. "It is something else." She looked around nervously. "May we speak somewhere private?" she asked. Carrick nodded at once. He picked up her trunk, loaded it into his wagon, then helped her climb up. As they rode out of town, Amelia gripped her valise the whole way. She sat stiff and silent until they reached open prairie where the fields stretched wide under the fading light. Then she finally spoke. "I lied to you in my letter," she said. Carrick kept his hands steady on the reins, though his heart sank. "About what?" he asked gently. She took a slow breath. "I was a schoolteacher. That part was true. But I did not leave my position by choice. The headmaster's son spread lies about me after I turned down his advances. The school dismissed me. After that, no one in Boston would hire me. My reputation was ruined." The wind moved through the grass around them as Amelia kept talking, her voice trembling with shame and exhaustion. She said she could find no work. Her parents cared more about social opinion than truth. She had no future left in Boston. So she answered Carrick's advertisement, but she could not bring herself to tell the whole truth. She feared he would not want her if he knew. Carrick listened in quiet stillness. He felt anger on her behalf. He also felt a strange protectiveness settle already in his chest. When she fell silent, he spoke carefully. "You wanted a fresh start," he said. "That is what matters." She blinked hard. "You do not mind the scandal?" she asked. Carrick shook his head. "Out here, people judge a person by what they do, not by gossip. Every one of us came west to start over. You are not alone in that." Her breath stuttered, and she looked away fast as more tears slipped down her cheeks. But these tears seemed different, softer, almost relieved. Soon the ranch came into view. A modest house with a wide porch stood strong against the open land. The cattle grazed across the rolling hills, and the barn sat clean and ready for evening chores. Rusty, the ranch dog, bounded toward them with a happy bark. Amelia watched the dog run in circles, and her face softened a little. "This is your home?" she asked. "Ours," Carrick said before thinking. "If you want it." She looked startled by the word ours. Inside the house, she moved slowly from room to room. Everything was clean and ready for her. Carrick had polished the furniture and laid out a fresh quilt on the bed he had prepared. Amelia touched the wildflowers on the dresser with a trembling hand. "You did all this?" she asked. "I wanted you to feel welcome," he said. Later she cooked a simple supper and they ate quietly. Afterward, Carrick walked outside to finish the evening chores. Amelia stood at the window holding Rusty's head in her hands while she watched him cross the yard. Her eyes looked calmer now, though shadows remained. When Carrick returned, she said softly, "I do not know what the future will be, but I want to try." Carrick felt something settle deep in him, something steady and warm. "Then we will try together," he said. That night, in her small room upstairs, Amelia lay awake, listening to the wind. She was still afraid, still uncertain, but for the first time in months, she felt a small, steady place inside her, where hope could grow. She had arrived in tears, but maybe, just maybe, she had stepped into a life where she did not have to pretend anymore. The next morning, sunlight poured into the small bedroom, waking Amelia earlier than she expected. For a brief moment, she forgot where she was. Then the memory of yesterday washed over her. The coach, the tears, Carrick's steady voice, the long, quiet ride, and the way he had not judged her. She rose quickly, thinking she had overslept and failed her first morning in a new home. But when she hurried downstairs, Carrick was nowhere in sight. Only Rusty thumped his tail on the floor in greeting. The kitchen was tidy and warm. On the table she found a folded note written in strong, careful handwriting. "Miss Foster, I stepped out to check the north pasture. Be back later in the morning. There is coffee on the stove. Rest if you need to. Carrick Montgomery." Amelia let out a breath she did not know she was holding. He had not expected her to rise before dawn. He had not demanded anything from her. He had simply made room for her to breathe. Wanting to be useful, she rolled up her sleeves and began tidying the already clean kitchen. She washed dishes, swept the floors, and dusted shelves until the quiet house felt even more welcoming. She tried to keep her thoughts steady, but her mind wandered again and again to the strange freedom she felt in this place. Freedom from eyes that judged. Freedom from whispers. Freedom from the heavy shame she had carried so long. By the time Carrick returned, she was kneading dough at the table. She saw him through the window, leading his horse toward the barn. He walked with the easy stride of a man whose life was built on hard, honest work. Amelia found herself smoothing her hair without thinking. When he stepped through the door, he paused in the entryway. His boots stopped mid-step as he took in the gleaming counters, the swept floors, the new warmth in the room. "You have been busy," he said. "I hope I did not overstep," Amelia replied, brushing flour from her hands. Carrick shook his head. "Not at all. The house looks better than it has in a long while." There was something gentle in his voice that made Amelia look down before he could see the warmth in her eyes. She asked about the ranch, about his morning ride, and he told her about the pasture, the cattle count, and the creek that fed the land. He spoke with a natural calmness that eased her nerves. Then he asked about her family. Amelia's hand stilled on the dough. "My parents care more for social standing than truth," she said quietly. "When the scandal happened, they were embarrassed by it, even though I had done nothing wrong. They told me to hide in Maine until the gossip died down." Carrick's face tightened. "They did not defend you?" "No," she whispered. "They only cared what the neighbors might say." Carrick leaned his shoulder against the doorframe and spoke in his steady way. "Sounds like coming west was the best decision you could have made." No one had ever spoken so plainly on her behalf. Amelia felt a strange heaviness lift from her chest. After breakfast, Carrick offered to show her the ranch. They walked side by side across the open fields. Rusty raced ahead through the tall grass. The sun warmed the land slowly, and the sky stretched wide and blue above them. Carrick pointed out the natural spring that never ran dry, the grazing rotations he used, and the borders of the land he had worked so hard to shape. "How long have you been here?" she asked. 5 years, Carrick said. "I came west after the war with nothing but what I had saved. Worked other ranches, learned what I needed, then bought this place when I could." Amelia studied the land with new eyes. It was not grand, but every piece of it carried purpose. Every fence post seemed placed with care. Every part of the ranch told the story of a man who had built his life, piece by piece. "It is impressive," she said softly. "You have done so much on your own." Carrick turned his head slightly, as if checking whether she meant it. When he saw she did, a quiet smile formed on his face, small but true. They reached the corral where several horses waited under the morning sun. He introduced her to Buck, Penny, and Daisy. When he told her Daisy would be hers if she stayed, Amelia smiled. "She looks gentle," she said, stroking the Palomino's neck. "She is," Carrick said. "Good for someone who does not ride much." Amelia lifted her brow. "Who said I do not ride?" Carrick blinked. "You do? My grandfather owned a farm. I spent summers there. I can ride well enough." To prove it, she placed her foot in the stirrup and mounted Daisy with smooth practice. Carrick stared for a moment, surprised, then laughed softly. "Well," he said, "seems I still have plenty to learn about you." They rode the property together. Amelia sat tall in the saddle, her hair lifting in the breeze, her eyes bright with something she had not felt in a long time: freedom. She could tell Carrick was seeing her differently now, not as a fragile woman who arrived crying, but as someone steady and capable. A storm built in the west by afternoon, forcing them inside as heavy rain began drumming against the roof. Carrick lit a fire while Amelia dried her hair at the hearth. The glow warmed the room and softened the distance between them. For the first time, he showed her his account books. He explained how he tracked cattle, feed, equipment, and small loans he sometimes gave neighbors. Amelia was surprised by his careful handwriting and the neat order of his numbers. "You do all this alone?" she asked. "Mostly," he said. "Slow and steady keeps a ranch alive. Speed gets a man in trouble." She nodded. "That sounds like wisdom." He gave a quiet shrug. "Learned it the hard way." The storm made the afternoon stretch long and peaceful. They talked about teaching, about ranch life, about Boston winters and Wyoming skies. When they cooked supper together, they moved around each other with new ease. Their shoulders brushed once, and both paused for a moment too long. That night, as Amelia lay in bed listening to the last drops of rain tap against the window, she thought about how different she felt. When she stepped off the coach, she had been certain she had made the worst mistake of her life. But now something new had taken root. She did not feel the same crushing fear. She did not feel judged. She felt like the tight ring around her heart was loosening at last. And downstairs, Carrick sat in his chair, staring into the quiet fire. He was a practical man who trusted what he saw more than what he hoped for. But he could not deny the truth growing inside him. The woman who had arrived in tears might be stronger than anyone he had ever known, and he wondered what it might mean if she decided to stay. The next morning, Amelia woke before the sun. The storm had passed, and the world outside her window glowed faintly with the early light of dawn. She dressed quickly and hurried downstairs, hoping to have breakfast waiting for Carrick. But he was already in the kitchen, standing by the stove with a fresh pot of coffee steaming beside him. He looked up from the paper in his hand. "Morning," he said with a warm look she had not seen before. "Sleep all right?" "Yes," she said. "Better than I have in months." He folded the paper and slipped it into his pocket. I made a list for town. Thought we might ride in together. You could meet more folks, pick up supplies, and if you want, visit the dress shop for something nice for Sunday." She hesitated. "For the wedding?" He nodded. "Only if you are ready." Something in his steady tone calmed her doubts. "I am ready." Carrick did not smile wide, but she saw relief in the small lift at the corner of his mouth. "Good." After breakfast, he kept his promise to teach her how to milk Bessie. In the soft quiet of the barn, he guided her hands on the warm, gentle cow. His touch was careful, respectful, steady. Amelia felt her breath hitch at the closeness of him, but she focused on the work until she found the rhythm. When the milk began to flow, he stepped back with a small, approving nod. "You learn quick," he said. "I had a patient teacher," she replied. Their eyes met for a moment that stretched just long enough to make her heart warm before he cleared his throat and stepped away. "I will saddle the horses," he said. "We should leave soon." The ride into Willow Creek took less than an hour. Amelia sat tall on Daisy while Carrick rode beside her. The morning sun lit the land in soft gold. When they reached the main street, people paused to look at them. Carrick was well known and respected, and now everyone was curious about the woman who had arrived at his side. Inside the general store, Mrs. Wilson greeted Amelia with a cheerful grin. She chatted freely, telling Amelia that many young women in town had once hoped Carrick would notice them. Amelia felt her face grow warm at the idea. She glanced toward Carrick, who was examining tools with complete focus, unaware of his own appeal. Mrs. Wilson leaned in. "You are lucky, dear. That man is steady as they come, and he has been alone too long." Amelia felt her heart flutter with something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. She visited the dress shop next. The seamstress measured her quickly but kindly and promised a simple blue dress by Saturday. Then Carrick took her to meet the preacher's wife, the banker, and several families who welcomed her without hesitation. Every handshake felt like a small brick laid in the foundation of a new life. By midday, Amelia had received invitations to church gatherings, sewing circles, and Sunday dinners. For the first time since leaving Boston, she felt she belonged somewhere. On the ride back, Carrick slowed his horse at the top of a hill. "I like to stop here," he said. "Wanted you to see the ranch from this angle." Below them the land spread wide and peaceful. The house stood steady and bright in the afternoon sun. The barn cast a long shadow. The cattle grazed quietly around the fields. The whole view looked honest and strong. "It is beautiful," Amelia said. Carrick studied her face instead of the land. "It will be your home if you want it to be." She turned toward him, her heart steady. "I want it." He nodded once, and in that small nod lay a growing trust neither of them had planned. Sunday came clear and bright. Amelia wore the new dress, a simple blue that matched her eyes. Carrick wore his best suit, with boots polished and hair trimmed. When they stepped into the church together, the entire congregation turned to look. But Amelia did not feel fear. Carrick stood steady beside her, and that was enough. The preacher spoke soft vows. Carrick's voice was deep and sure when he promised to protect, provide, and walk beside her. Amelia's voice trembled only once, but grew steadier as she spoke her part. When the preacher told Carrick he could kiss his bride, he paused long enough to make sure she was comfortable. Amelia gave a small nod, and Carrick leaned in to give her a gentle kiss filled with respect and quiet promise. They walked out of the church as husband and wife. The town erupted into smiles and handshakes. Mrs. Wilson hugged Amelia tight. The Brennans congratulated Carrick like he was a son returning home. Everywhere she turned, she saw friendly faces. The Brennan family hosted Sunday dinner. Amelia sat beside Carrick as the family shared stories about him. They told her how he rode through blizzards to help neighbors, how he lent money with no interest, how he worked harder than almost anyone in the county. She listened with growing admiration. When they returned home, Carrick lifted her gently into his arms and carried her across the doorway. "For good luck," he said with a shy smile. Inside, he set her down and kept his hands at her waist for a lingering moment. "Amelia," he said, "I do not expect anything from you tonight. Not until you want it." She placed her hand over his heart. "I want to be your wife in truth." His breath caught. He kissed her then, soft at first, then with the warm certainty of a man who had found something he did not think life would ever give him again. That night they began their marriage not with fear but with trust. Weeks passed into months. Amelia learned ranch chores, helped with cattle, tended the garden, and taught lessons to children in town when the school needed help. Carrick supported everything she tried. They shared evenings on the porch, mornings in the barn, and long, quiet dinners filled with simple conversation that grew deeper over time. One night near the fire, Amelia watched Carrick reading and felt something rise in her chest, something steady and real. "I love you," she said. Carrick froze. He stared at her with stunned eyes before he set his book aside. "I have loved you for longer than I knew how to say," he replied. Their kiss that night felt like sealing the truth that had been growing since the day she stepped off the stagecoach. By fall, Amelia carried their first child. The day she told Carrick, he lifted her in his arms before remembering to set her down gently. The whole town celebrated. Mrs. Brennan knitted blankets. Mrs. Wilson brought warm bread and stories for the baby. When their son, James, was born on a clear October morning, Carrick held him with awe. Amelia watched her husband cradle the tiny child and felt the last pieces of her old fear fall away. One evening, near their first anniversary, they sat by the fire while snow began to fall outside. Carrick lifted a glass. "To the woman who arrived in tears," he said, "and the life we built because she found the courage to stay." Amelia placed her hand on his. "To the man who gave me a place where I never had to pretend." They kissed softly as the snow drifted over the quiet ranch, and the home they built together glowed with warmth and promise for every year still ahead.